Hello and welcome. Today we're going to talk about the growing role of Linux in our increasingly connected world, where the communications landscape itself is becoming more complex. And I'm delighted to have Amit Ronen from Wind River here with me to address this topic. A big welcome to you.
Thank you very much.
Let's start off thinking about devices. So in this increasingly connected world where we have a growth of smarter edge devices, what does that landscape look like for these devices? And how do we need to develop and support them?
In this increasingly connected world, we are going to have more and more mission-critical connected devices, meaning devices that honestly our society is going to be more and more dependent on in order to run the course, as we like it. Those devices will be connected, they'll be smart, and will need to be safe and secure. I think this is stuff that we all expect, right? We take it for granted. Some of those devices also will have very long life cycle in the field, meaning they're going to live there in the field like for many years. Companies will need to consider all those parameters when they design and build those devices, covering the technology use, but also the development process that they need to put in place in order to develop, launch, deploy, and manage those devices for this very long cycle. In the Linux world in specific, as you mentioned, we know that one aspect of being secure is also being able to constantly close what we call technical debts, like CVEs and issues and bugs, and increase the technology stack all the time. But that's definitely a challenge that people will need to take into consideration as they develop those devices.
Okay. Another issue that comes up a lot is the whole subject of Linux and open source being free or not free. So the notion is that it's free. So why should companies have to pay for commercial versions?
It's a great question, right? As you said, that comes a lot. And as I keep reminding my kids all the time, and as the saying goes, there are no free lunches. Nothing is really for free. And yes, it's true. You can get a version of Linux for free from the internet. But the real complexity comes when you need to create the integrated environment, this distribution of Linux required to build your specific product. And then the big challenge is maintaining it for the long run, as we just discussed, right? Those things are going to be in the field for many, many years. And this is really where the difficult part starts. We see many companies that actually fail in this particular area. They get a free version of Linux, either from the internet, maybe from the semiconductor vendor. They are successful building the first version of the product, and everybody feels great. We did it, it's easy, it looks easy at the beginning, but then comes the difficult part of dealing with the hard work of maintaining and enhancing this Linux environment that they have, and supporting the growing number of variations as time goes by. You need to deal with bugs. And lo and behold, you find pretty quickly that the community don't have a hotline to call when your product is down or when you have a critical issue. And that the community operate in a very different timeline than yours and your customers. And what do you need in order to serve your customers? You also realize that Linux, like many of the successful open source projects out there that people are using, is very deep on the technology stack. In order to be able to address different issues, you need to have a gamut of expertise in your organization if you do it all by yourself. So if at the beginning you thought you could have a small team of people to maintain your Linux distro, you find that this team is quickly growing to cover all aspects of your environment. Another aspect I would like to call is that people neglect to think about at the beginning is addressing all kind of IP compliance and IP audits that they need to do. And ensuring that there are no violations there. That's actually a really big exposure for big companies. And as you collect a lot of those packages that you need from the open source community, everything is governed by different IP licenses and legal constraints. And you need to make sure that you audit it, you are open with it, and you are complying with this. And one more area that I believe received more and more attention lately, honestly, is on the regulation side. We see movement from governments, and I think there have been some announcements from the US government lately regarding expectation and regulation that are going to come with security. And then you need to also be able to comply. If you do it all by yourself, that's all on you. So that's another toll that people who do not want to go with the commercial Linux and just to do it yourself, like think that everything is free, find pretty quickly, it's actually not free.
It can also turn out pretty expensive, actually.
Yeah, it is pretty expensive stuff. As you can see, this is not really cost effective for any single company to do it all by themselves.
So just really, to summarize, we'd say it's about the technology, but also about governance and regulation too.
Absolutely. So there are multiple layers here. And in many respects, these people that start with this see only the beginning. Oh, I'll be able to do it. I have smart people. They know the technology. I'll be able to do it myself. But then as you go deeper and deeper into it, you say, oh man, it's deeper than I thought. There are a lot of layers here that are not obvious when you start. Plus, a lot of companies, they have smart people. Everybody has smart people. The issue is, where do you want to invest the time of your smart people? Do you want it to be invested in stuff that is maybe not the most strategic for you, like running an operating system, or in the core products that you need to develop and the innovation that you need to deliver to your customers?
So, Amit, what sort of resources and what size of team would be required to maintain a company's own Linux distribution? So all the functions to develop and support the distribution in the field for 5 or 10 years. I mean, could you give us some feeling of the scale and scope of that?
Yeah, let's talk about it. So obviously, it all depends on the complexity of the device and the Linux environment that you need, right? The more complex your device, the deeper it is. You will need expertise in many layers of Linux, from kernel to drivers, user space, and others. So the stack is pretty deep. So if you really want to cover everything, you will need expertise in all those layers, right? You would need a team that works to maintain all the versions of your product too, right? Because you're in the market for the long run. So it's not only your first product, but it's all of them. Now you look on Linux and you say, hey, there are, just from a CVE perspective, which is a basic security aspect, there are thousands of CVEs, thousands reported every year. You will need a team of people, to go and analyze all of them, because not all of them are relevant to you. So you'll need to analyze all those CVE and identify which one is relevant to you. And the more complex environment you have, the more packages you use, the more CVEs eventually you need to address, the more version of the products you have, you will need to backport all of that backward. And then, you need to do for, as I said, all the various products that you have, all the backlog that you created, or all the product that you have in the field. You can see how this stack can command a very sizable team, again, on complex product, dozens of people. And this is even before we touch on all the expansion and adoption of new capabilities in your Linux environment, right? Because you also want to introduce innovation and new stuff. We're just talking about the maintenance piece. So the question I always ask our customers, at least, is really, why do you want to do it yourself, right? This is an area that it's actually worth, as we discussed before in the previous question, this is why there are commercial offerings, exactly because of this, because the team of the people that you need, and also you need to remember that you need those team of people to be able to react sometimes in your timeline. And what I mean by that is when you have a critical issue in the field, you need to react now. And if you don't have the bandwidth right now because people are doing other things or the specific expertise, you're going to get delayed. So in a sense, what I'm trying to say, if you really want to be able to generate or to deliver the service that you need to your customers, you will need to plan for the peaks, right? Which is not cost effective. No company wants always to plan for the peak. So therefore, as you can see, per the question you asked, in order to do all that, the team can get very sizable. Obviously, depends on the complexity of what you do and the product. But this is not easy to manage.
So I guess just like we don't build networks anymore for a peak level, we build them so that we can add capacity when we need it. We need to have the same mindset with Linux and not 100%. Just assume, you've got to be ready for an emergency and need that workforce all the time and that talent pool. And of course, that talent pool is scarce. So what other hidden costs and efforts are required to maintain your own Linux distribution that people often don't think about?
Yeah, so I think we covered many of them, right, during the discussion. But to summarize, I want to say this. Linux is like an iceberg. You can clearly see the tip, right, when you're looking. But, and it looks simple. Yeah, I can see it. It's clear. It's small. I can conquer it. But you can generate a perceived, as I said, quick success, as we discussed before. But the huge complexity is not that clear. The enormous work required to successfully do it for the long run is often ignored at the beginning. This is true to both small companies, by the way, and very, very big companies. And just to say, let's remember that even the Titanic was sunk by an iceberg.
Are there any other pitfalls you think we should talk about Linux and roll your own and why? I'm just wondering about forking and a lack of consistency across updates and who's responsible and if different teams do their own thing and retro engineering is expensive and painful and slow.
A great point, that you're raising, because once you start doing it yourself, especially in big companies, the management and the control of the team that is doing it, once you give the power internally, it's tough to control, right? So your product, different teams, people tend to fork, people tend to build their own, and pretty quickly you find yourself that you don't manage one version of Linux. You manage multiple versions of Linux, and now multiply all the complexity that we just discussed on, now I have multiple. Now you are really dealing with a monumental task to manage that. And in the connected world, it's part of the thing that I touched at the beginning, didn't expand, but on the processes, people are expected everything to be much more agile today, updates and so on. Need to be much more frequent. Features, innovation, much more frequent to your customers. Multiply all those so it become really, as we like to call it, the matrix from hell, to manage.
Well, I just think you're then creating a monster and you're fighting that monster day in, day out, just to stand still. This is 100%. Not about innovation and all those other great benefits that you pick to use Linux for anyway.
100%. And think about it at the end of the day, for most customers or for most companies, for what? This is just the operating system layer. We are not even talking about their product, the innovation that you need to build on top. You are talking just about managing a layer that should be commoditized for them.
It's kind of, why would you look after your own plumbing, really? You wouldn't.
100%. Yes. This is plumbing, right? 100%.
With no disrespect to the Linux community.
No.
Okay,
No.
Amit, thank you very much.
No, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.